I just got started reading the Odyssey as part of my huge read through of both of Homer's epic poems. I already read the Iliad and posted the update videos for that, and now I'm jumping into the Odyssey, which, unlike the Iliad, I've read before now. I read the Odyssey years ago. It was a pretty dated prose translation of it, but despite that, I quite enjoyed it. So I know that I'm going to like the Odyssey again. The Iliad I found to be quite dense and difficult and a little bit boring in places, but the Odyssey was just this gung-ho adventure the whole time, and I was really digging it. And I know that this revisit is going to be a lot more significant. I'm going to get a lot more out of it than I did the first time reading it, partially because now that I've read the Iliad, I've been introduced intimately with some of the characters that are going to be cropping up in the Odyssey. In fact, I wasn't even aware of the character names that come up in Odysseus's journey from the Iliad. Like, obviously, I knew Odysseus is in both epic poems, but I had forgotten that he meets people like Nestor and even Helen of Troy from the Iliad. Like, I guess the names kind of slipped my mind. Now, I read the introduction. That's the one part that I've read so far, and it was 80 pages long. It was like everything and the kitchen sink, contextualizing the Odyssey, talking about the roles of men, the roles of women, the historicity, and like the time it was written, how the people's impressions of the Odyssey have changed over time, over the centuries. So, what did the early Christians think of it? What did the, Romans think of it? And all this stuff. It was a really great way of getting these analytical breakdowns of the Odyssey while also refreshing myself of what's going to be coming here. And so I'm really excited to get into it. The Odyssey has a lot of stuff that I absolutely adored and very memorable, very well paced. It's very funny at times, suspenseful. Now, the one thing I remember kind of struggling with was Odysseus' son, Telemachus, because the story cuts back and forth between Odysseus and his son, who is trying to find him. And I found the stuff with Telemachus to be a little bit slower to get through, and I just was like, yeah, come get back to Odysseus. I want to get back into the adventure. But now that I know about Athena and more about this story from the Iliad, I feel like I'm going to get more out of these sections. So I'm really excited to get into the Odyssey, and I hope that you follow along with me as I read through it. It's about 2 in the morning, and I just spent the last 3 hours reading the Odyssey. I made it all the way up to book 5, and right away I'm starting to realize just how much I've forgotten since I first read the Odyssey about 6 years ago. Now, I knew, obviously, that a lot of the story focuses on Telemachus, the son of Odysseus, as he sets out to search for word of his long-lost father, but I forgot just how much of this book focuses on Telemachus, because I haven't even gotten to Odysseus yet. The book starts off and we basically get Athena appealing to Zeus to help convince Calypso to let Odysseus go. He's been held captive by this lesser god for nearly a decade now. And then from there we cut straight to Telemachus. We get this good introduction to the situation at Odysseus' home. It's basically been taken over by all these would-be suitors who all want to marry Telemachus' mom so they can inherit the Ithacan throne and all the wealth and power that entails. But Athena shows up and she's like, I have this vision about your father returning, come with me, or whatever. And so that's a lot of fun. Now, part of why I forgot about Telemachus' side of the story is because it's chock full of references to other Greek heroes and stuff. But now that I've read the Iliad and I've gotten some background on the characters in the Iliad, all of it is standing out to me in a way that it just didn't before. Telemachus runs into Nestor, he runs into Menelaus, he meets Helen, he hears all about Agamemnon, and the first time that I read the Odyssey, I didn't really know these characters, and while the Odyssey is simple enough that you can get into it blind and still be pretty comfortable. I'm getting so much more out of it now because, for example, with Agamemnon and his tragedy or whatever, I'm realizing it bears this uncanny resemblance to what might happen to Odysseus if he comes home and the suitors marry his wife and turn her against him in the way that what happened with Agamemnon. So I get a lot of it more. So I feel like I'm going to retain all of the Telemachus stuff better than I did the first time I read the Odyssey. I'm also really interested in the way that it's tapping into these themes of being a proper house guest and the etiquette around that and how important that was to Greek culture and mythos and all this stuff. Like, if someone shows up on your doorstep asking for a favor, it might be a god in disguise, so you best not piss them off or whatever. So there's a lot I'm learning. It's not as humorous as I remember, but maybe that'll come into play later. But anyway, hope you enjoy this update. Continue to follow me as I read along with the Odyssey. I got to book 10 in the Odyssey, meaning I just got through the Cyclops part, which was absolutely great, just as I remembered it. But I'm finding I'm getting so much more insight into everything that's going on because I've read other Greek stories since the first time I read the Odyssey. So a lot more of it is really coming to life for me. And it's helped by the fact that the Odyssey is feeling very much like a modern fantasy or adventure story. It's a little bit slower paced, but all the story beats are there. In the first 5 books of the Odyssey, we were all with Telemachus, and he's setting out on his journey to find his father, and as he is, he's bumping into Odysseus' old war buddies and learning about what a great stand-up guy Odysseus is, but we're also getting hints that maybe he pissed off a god or two, and that's why he was absent for nearly 10 years. And so then we jump to Odysseus' perspective as he is permitted by the gods, finally, to flee from Calypso. He runs into some hosts, and then he tells his story. And this is where we learn that although he is quite cunning and good at strategizing and all this stuff, he's also a bit of an idiot because he tells this Cyclops story where they're getting away from him scot-free. They just blinded him. They're rowing away in their ships as fast as they can. And Odysseus has the bright fucking idea to start boasting. He's just like, I'm not nobody. My name is Odysseus, and this is my address, and this is my social insurance number, and follow me on Instagram. And like, he's just giving him all this personal information so that if the Cyclops was, I don't know, related to a god, that he could easily tell the god, hey, this guy from this place blinded me, please punish him. And wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happens. So his crew is just like, shut up, Odysseus, because the god gets angry and kills the entire crew, and Calypso captures Odysseus, and that's where we are. So one thing I'm noticing is that the Odysseus of this past is way more of a dick than the current Odysseus who's telling this story to his hosts, because this Odysseus has only so far told one little white lie to preserve the honor of one of the women who helped him. But this last Odysseus did not care about the safety of the people around him if it served his own ego, you know what I mean? And there are some slow parts. There's this part where they get into some games and competitions with his hosts, which seems to be a recurring theme in these epic Greek poems, and I find them kind of boring. But I'm also getting insights, like I said. One of them is that the intro tells me that Athena is represented by the olive tree. So Odysseus he hides himself under an olive bush at one point, and later he uses an olive spear to blind the Cyclops. All these unexplicit ways that Athena is helping him. So I'm getting a lot out of this. I'm really enjoying myself. Follow along as I continue to read the Odyssey. I managed to read a little bit more of the Odyssey last night, although not quite as much as I had hoped because I've been really tired lately. So I was literally falling asleep as I was reading it, but not because I was bored or anything. In any case, I managed to get up to book 12. Odysseus is still telling his massive backstory here to the Phaeacians. This is the backstory where we get all the famous stuff from the Odyssey, like the Cyclops and the Sirens, etc., etc. So the books that I covered last night got us to the island of Circe and the land of the dead. One thing I did not remember is how long they stay with Circe after Odysseus goes in and saves his men from being transformed into pigs and forgetting their journey. He decides to just, thanks to Hermes' prompting, sleeps with Circe and stays there a whole year. So I can't help but feel that Circe kind of got her way a little bit in delaying the men for that long. But then right as they're about to depart, we finally get some humor. One of the men is shit-faced drunk and he realizes everyone's leaving, so he bolts headlong right out of the tower and falls down to his death. And then a little bit later, we see him again, his spirit at the land of the dead, and he's just like, I'm dead. Anyway, Circe tells them to go to the land of the dead so that they can get some answers that'll help Odysseus later on. And I love the men's reaction to this. They just fall to the ground crying and kicking and screaming like, not the land of the dead. They're like children throwing a tantrum. This is something I've noticed in my whole read of Homer's work here, where, today masculinity is associated with being stoic and being very reserved in your emotions. But here, all of the men really wear their emotions on their sleeves. Sometimes it's warranted, like when they tragically lose a loved one, but other times it comes off as very silly. And then, when they're in the land of the dead, Odysseus summons all of these spirits, including this guy from the Theban plays. The last time I read the Odyssey, I hadn't read the Theban plays, so this was kind of going over my head here. But now that I've read the Theban plays, I'm really catching the significance of all of this and how it relates. There's also a lot of references to the Oresteia, but unfortunately I haven't read those yet. So I know there's a lot more that I can still gain from reading other Greek myths and understanding Homer and all that. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I'm interested in the piety lessons being taught because Odysseus is meeting spirits who are like these warning tales for what'll happen to you if you don't listen to the gods properly and all that. So hopefully you enjoy listening to my updates as I continue to read through Homer. I made it to book 15 of the Odyssey, meaning Odysseus is home. He made it back to Ithaca after telling his massive story to the Phaeacians, where all the stuff with like Calypso and Scylla and the Sirens is all sort of passed over in a pretty brief way that I don't quite remember, where basically he's told about these things and what he has to do to overcome them, and then he's like, okay, I'll do that, and then he does it, and then he overcomes them. So it's not quite told in the way that I remember, but despite that, I still definitely enjoyed those parts. I thought they were pretty cool, and I'm quite curious to see how they'll be dramatized in the movie that's coming out next year. I'll probably do a short video to talk about my feelings on that. But anyway, then he arrives home in Ithaca and he's in disguise. There's this recurring motif that I've noticed in the Iliad, but which is cropping up even more here, of powerful people, especially gods, appearing in disguise as some other form, and then hoping that the people around them still treat them kindly and with respect and all that, as like these little moral tests that they're like, okay, now that I'm disguised and you're not obligated to treat me with deference, I wonder how you're going to treat me if I appear as a beggar, for instance. But we're told that he's doing that mostly because he doesn't want people to know that he's in Ithaca yet, because word will get out to the suitors who are trying to all fuck his wife, and then they will lay in wait for him and kill him, which seems weird to me because Odysseus is like one of the strongest warriors alive at this time, but in any case, so there is some story justification for this, but it's also playing into that old motif that I just explained. So I find it kind of interesting, and Athena, while she's guiding him, is also like, oh yeah, speaking of lying in wait to kill you, that's what the suitors are about to do to your son, so let me go run off to him. So she's gonna run off and sort of get the whole gang together, and then they're going to enact their vengeance on all the suitors. So I'm quite excited for that. It is playing out in a way that's pretty different from what I remember in some cases. Like for some reason, I remember it cutting back to Odysseus's wife and almost like this comedy routine where she's kind of like insulting them as they're like eating her out of house and home. Maybe that's going to happen just a little bit later from now. We'll see. But in any case, I'm enjoying it. I'm curious to see how it plays out and how similar or different it is from what I remember from when I read it 6 years ago. But yeah, follow along as I continue to update you. I've kind of lapsed in my updates on the Odyssey here. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and now I'm all the way up to book 21, meaning I'm going to finish this the next time I read it. So right after I finish recording this video, I'm going to sit down and get the Odyssey out of the way. So I'm pretty eager for that, especially because I feel like I've been waiting on Odysseus to take action now for quite a while. Like I said last time, he's back in Ithaca, but he's in disguise as a beggar. And now he's back in his own home, where he's dealing with all kinds of abuse and violence from all of the 100+ suitors that are all trying to fuck his wife while he's gone. And while I remember this section of him being in disguise and like planning against the suitors and how to take revenge and whatever, I don't remember it going on for quite this long. I don't understand quite what he's waiting for. So I kind of feel like I'm looking at my watch, just like, oh, are you gonna do it? Are you gonna do it? Come on, come on. Now, he kind of explains that he is very wary about taking on all these people single-handed, even though he's going to have Athena backing him up. But I'm still kind of in this purgatory of waiting for the action to unfold. It feels like this sort of unnatural lingering on the precipice of action. So that leaves me to do what I always do when it's slow going, which is to kind of notice the motifs that are coming in here. Now, like I said, he's in disguise, but his son is aware of who he is, and while he's in disguise, he's summoned before Penelope, his wife, and she's like, "Where are you from, stranger?" And he tells this big, long story about how he's from Crete and blah, 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 and she doesn't recognize him, supposedly. But I think that Penelope does recognize him, because after she talks to him, she's just like, "Oh, I just decided, spur of the moment, I know it's been 10 years or whatever since Odysseus went, but hey, I decided let's have an archery contest, and I know only Odysseus can do it, but whoever comes the closest to doing it is going to be the one who marries me." So that's awfully convenient timing, but also, his old maidservant recognizes him, giving him a massage. She sees a scar, and she's like, "Oh, you are Odysseus." And I thought he was going to be like, "Shh, don't tell anybody. It's just between you and me." But instead, he grabs her by the throat, and he's just like, "If you tell anybody I'm here, I will fucking kill you." And I'm just like, our hero, ladies and gentlemen. So we're getting all of this ridiculousness. We're also getting augury, which is like foretelling the future through the actions of birds, which I just find to be the silliest way of telling the future in these ancient stories, where like the characters will be on the precipice of a major decision, and then they'll see like an eagle fucking a chicken or something, and they'll be like, "Aha! 'Tis a sign!" A sign in this case that Odysseus is about to arrive and kill a bunch of suitors. So I'm like, okay, we know, we're getting the foreshadowing now. Make it happen, please. I finished the Odyssey. Quite the accomplishment to say that I have now read all of Homer's epic poems. But yeah, in this video, I'm just going to talk about the last few chapters, and then I'm going to do another short video summing up my thoughts on the book overall. Anyway, how does the Odyssey end? Why, it ends with a complete massacre. There's this pretext of a fake contest to win Penelope's hand in marriage, which I think is her trap to set up all the suitors in one place. And then Odysseus wins it, and he's kind of a sore winner because he murders all of his competitors in cold blood. Before he does, though, he kind of reflects, like, maybe if I kill all of these cherished sons from all over Greece, people might be mad at me. And then he does it anyway. With Athena's help, he kills them all, and not only that, he also kills a lot of slave girls, because apparently they've been conspiring against him by sleeping with the suitors. Earlier on, Odysseus thought that this was not consensual, but then he hears through the grapevine of another handmaid that, in fact, they were planning against him. So he just gets rid of them. It's kind of like the Iliad, except in the Odyssey, it works. In the Iliad, it's just so-and-so kills so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. And it's very gory, but you don't really know the characters. In the Odyssey, you do know the characters. They've been set up over the whole story. The tension's been mounting and mounting, so it's like this big catharsis to have it all paid off in the most gruesome, over-the-top way possible. There's some, farmhands that help him. It's a lot of fun. And then he goes to reintroduce himself to his father, still in disguise. I don't know why Odysseus is so obsessed with this song and dance of pretending to be somebody else, and then surprise, I'm actually Odysseus. He makes his own dad cry, reliving the trauma of losing his son. And then he reveals himself, I am your son, and then he's just like, oh, by the way, a bunch of people are coming to kill us. We better skedaddle. They go back to Odysseus' house, and the family members of the suitors all show up to kill him and the father, and for some reason Odysseus doesn't think he can fight his way out this time. I don't know why. But anyway, Athena steps in, and she helps Odysseus' father kill someone in the crowd, and then she decides to stand up and be like, we should set violence aside, put vengeance aside, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, Athena, you've been keying these people on the entire time. Don't pretend you're innocent in this. And then everybody's like, oh, I guess this goddess is right. Let's all go home. And then it just ends in a very clean, sudden way, just like the Iliad did. But yeah, it was a lot of fun for the last chapter. Quite the payoff. I really got a kick out of it, even though it was dark and morbid and creepy and weird. But hey, it's Greek myth. I have now finished the Odyssey and the Iliad by Homer, meaning I have read all of his epic poems, and I can finally brag about it to all my friends to make me seem like I'm an intellectual. So, this, like I've said before, was my second time reading the Odyssey, but my first time reading the Iliad. So now I can sort of compare and contrast them because I read them back to back, and I gotta say, no surprises here. I way, way preferred the Odyssey. If I had to give them both a rating, I would give the Iliad like a 5 or 6 out of 10, and the Odyssey somewhere between a 7 and an 8 out of 10. So quite the difference in quality, and that's because the Odyssey just has this forward momentum that the Iliad does not, where it's just kind of like you feel like you're going in circles until the last few books of the Iliad. With the Odyssey, there's a motivation, there's a goal, there's a lot of adventure and obstacles that are really cool to see Odysseus face. There's like intercutting between him and his son and his wife back home. There's humor, there's suspense, creepy moments. It's just really fun. It's no wonder it's often used as like an entry point for students or anyone interested in reading ancient writing. The only ancient tale, whether it's a poem or a play, that I enjoy on the same level as the Odyssey would be the Aeneid, which was written by Romans about 800 years later as kind of like the Roman equivalent of Homer's epic poems, which kind of brings all of Homer's adventures in the Odyssey and the war from the Iliad into one contained story. But as you might guess, the Aeneid is much more dense, it's longer, so the Odyssey is a lot friendlier to beginners, but it's also obviously a rich story, which is very rewarding on multiple readings, and I can definitely say that for a fact now because I noticed so many things on this second go-through that I didn't before. Part of this was because since my first time reading the Odyssey, where I knew next to nothing about ancient Greek stories, now I've read, the Theban plays, the Iliad, the Aeneid, all this other stuff, so now I get all these little references that are getting thrown at me all the time, and I'm aware that there's more references that I don't get yet. For example, I haven't read the Oresteia trilogy of plays, and I know the Odyssey references it quite a bit. But what's interesting is the Odyssey came out hundreds of years before either of those, so that's very clear evidence that Homer was working with all of these stories that were probably just told orally, passed down through word of mouth, and hadn't been written down yet, or maybe we had earlier versions that got lost of those other stories. But yeah, just a really interesting read through this has been. I'm going to do a full-length review for it, so stay tuned for that.